Okay, so these are the solutions we're going to be looking at today. We've got information protection, information governance, internal risk, data classifications, data connectors, communication compliance, advanced threat protection, and endpoint manager. As you can appreciate, there's a lot to get through, so we're not going to be deep diving. We've just picked some highlights just to show you how you can use these solutions to protect your Office 365 environment. These statistics highlight the challenges of the new working environment. Where we used to have our own network protected by a firewall, and we would be able to protect our data within that network, we now have environments that are hybrid with Office 365, with Azure. We're now using cloud applications. We've got users external to our network using different devices to access that data. So the challenges of today is to be able to protect all that information and be able to protect those devices and users that aren't necessarily connected to our network. This is Microsoft's approach for information protection and governance. We have the unified approach to help discover, classify, and label information. We can then apply automatically policy-based actions, proactive monitoring to help us identify risks, policy violations, label analytics. And once you've applied the label, that information is then protected on devices, in apps, cloud services, on-premise, and third-party applications. It's now a unified approach because Microsoft have merged the Azure information protection and the cloud app security into this one labeling section where you can create labels and policies, and they'll be pushed out to all of those other services. So on the next screen, we'll start looking at how we can create policies and labels. Okay, so let's take a look how we're going to discover and classify and label our information. So first of all, we're going to take a look at data classifications. As you can see, Microsoft have provided us with some classifiers. We can also create our own classifiers. I'm not going to create my own classifier because you need to point it at a SharePoint site which contains 50 to 500 document types that you want the classifier to, or the AI to learn what those documents are, or how we can then identify those documents elsewhere in your environment. But it is very useful if you have certain types of documents that you want to be able to identify around your environment, then this is where you would come and create your classifier. We've also then got sensitive information types, and in here we can, if we take a look at the UK ones, when it loads, there we go. Okay, so we've got driver's license numbers, passport numbers, and things like that. So basically, it's just going to go and look for those documents that contain these kind of number sequences, and then you're able to add some sort of protection or governance onto that document. You can also, again, create your own. I did create one, and if I can spell, I can find it. So this one here is going to be using keywords, and what I've set it to do is find documents with payment, billing, and quote in the document, and if it finds those, then we can then apply a label or a restriction or some governance around that. Also good to test, so you can upload a file and check to make sure that it is identifying the right document, or identifying the information in the document. Just cancel out of that a moment. So while we're here, we'll take a look at the Content Explorer. So once you've applied all your labels across your environment, you might want to come and see exactly where they are all located. So you can take a look in and see in here exactly what or in which locations your documents are located. So we've only got Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Obviously, if you've got an on-premise environment and you're using AIP, then you'll be able to search those environments. Same with the cloud app security. It's pretty cool, and it'll probably help you be able to define some more of your security policies to make sure you further protect those environments. Then we've got the Activity Explorer. Again, this is pretty good to be able to define your security policies. So here you can review activity related to content that contains sensitive information or has labels applied. So again, we've got nothing because this is a test environment, but this will be where you would come to review where your information or what activity is happening on your labeled documents. So next place to look into is the information protection. Now in here, this is where we'll create labels to protect our data. Now these can be applied manually or they can be applied automatically. So when you create your labels, you'll then need to publish your labels to locations or users, so users can use them in their Office applications. So in the case of an email, they could then encrypt an email going out to an external recipient and limit the amount of time they have to review or look at that document. So just to show you how this looks, I've created this one, and if we take a quick look, we will see that I've applied encryption. We've assigned the permissions now. I'll show you the permissions in a minute, but you can also let the user assign permissions when they apply the label. So they'll get an additional pop-up to say, who do you want to assign permissions to? Users access to the content expires. So I want to limit the amount of time someone's got access to this particular email. I've put 3 days. Again, you can have never, or you can have a specified date. Specified dates are okay, but you'll probably be in here a lot to create these labels if you're going to do specified dates. And then we can apply how many days we want the external user to have access. I always do never for offline access for obvious reasons. And then when it comes to permissions, we can assign permissions. We've got 4 options that we can assign permissions for. So at the top, you can see we can add everyone within the organization and groups, and the add any authenticated user, which is the setting I actually used on this particular label. So as you can see, the authenticated user isn't about everybody that's inside your organization. This can be people that are external to your organization, but they will need to authenticate to be able to do that. It doesn't need to be a Microsoft account. It can be a Gmail or a Yahoo or many others now. I can't remember them all, but pretty much most of them now will accept or be able to authenticate against the Office 365 requirement. Then you've got add all users and groups and add specific email addresses or domains. Then you can choose which kind of permissions you want them to have. So you've got co-owner, co-author, reviewer, viewer, and custom. Again, they're all pretty self-explanatory when you fill them in. They say what they can and can't do. In this case, we would probably want it as a viewer rather than anything else. And if we just save that, at this stage, you can apply a watermark or content mark, just to remind the recipient that this is a confidential information. This is confidential information, shouldn't be shared. And we could add a header or text. We can also auto apply this label. So in this scenario, we wouldn't want to auto apply the label because we want the user to select when they're sending this email, or maybe we would want to apply an auto label. So let's say we did want to apply an auto label. So we'd click on the auto label. We would want to add a condition. So if this email that's being sent out contains some sensitive information or a trainable classifier information, what we'll do is we'll select that one. we'll look at, let's find the one that I created. Oh, if I can spell, finance, there we go. And we could select that and we could add that. So any emails that are containing the finance keywords will then be encrypted, and the end user, or the recipient should I say, will then have 3 days to consume that information before access is then denied. And then we just save the label. Once that's been saved, I will show you how to set up policies. Okay, so that's now complete. Okay, so within the label policies, this is where you're publishing the labels. Just because you've created the labels doesn't mean that users can access those labels. So what we do to publish labels is we're going to go to publish labels, and we're going to choose the sensitivity label that we've created. Okay, and it was external sharing, so we're going to add that. And then we're going to choose who we're going to publish it to. So in this case, we're going to give it to Andrew Samuel. And then next. And at this stage, we can, probably not with this policy, but we might want to enforce the user whenever they're creating an email or a document that they always apply a label. It's not always going to be convenient for a user to always apply a label, except if they were working in finance. If they're always creating documents and or sending emails, you might want to enforce that they always apply some sort of label to that document. So within this label policy, we could have chose several different labels that they could choose from. So in this case, we could have gone, so not only have they got the external share and encryption label, but when they load, we could also have personal, general, confidential, highly confidential, and we could have picked all those labels that they can then select from when they're creating a document or or sending an email. So in here, we could say, right, every document has general, and if the user requires to remove or lower the label, they've got to make a justification of why they're doing that. Then we create a name for that policy, so finance department, and then we'll submit. So this is then publishing all of those labels to the finance department. So whenever they create a document, whenever they create an email, they're able then to use those labels to protect that information. So we'll have a quick look at the auto labeling. So again, the auto labeling, sorry, hang on, there we go. So again, the auto labeling works on the same principles that we just seen in the last email, in the last step. And we will just take a quick look. So loading templates. So in the finance, so we could say UK finance, or we could do a custom policy. So we'll just stick with the finance and we'll say UK data finance. So this is the information that's going to get protected. And that will leave it at the default name. We're going to say which location. So information in exchange. And we're just going to keep it with the common rule. I'll show you what that is. And as you can see, these are the rules that are applying. So it's low volume if it's internally, and high volume if it's externally. And then we can choose the label to apply. So just waiting for the labels to load. So we could say, okay, any of these documents or emails that contain this information, we're probably going to want to make it highly confidential, and we're going to add that, and And then we can, this is a really neat feature. So we can, this is part of the discovery side of things. So you can set this auto apply to run in simulation mode. So what it's going to do, it's going to go and look at all that information that's being passed around by users, by documents that are being created and so on, or have been created, and just give you an insight then as to how you should, or if you want to apply the label in its current format, or whether you need to go back and refine some of those policy rules to make sure that you're not encrypting or you're not protecting information and inadvertently causing the end user problems. And then it's just a case of, yeah, click and create. So now this policy is being created. It's now going to go and look across all of the locations that I've configured within Office 365, and it will then go and label those documents with the confidential label. Okay, so let's take a look at information governance. It works very similar to the way that information protection works, where you create labels and label policies. There's a few subtle differences. With this, you're publishing it to locations rather than to users. So if we take a quick look at this policy, or this label, sorry, that I created earlier, and as you can see, these are the settings we can choose. In this case, we're retaining items for a specific period of time, in this case 7 years, and we're going off when the item was created, and we're going to then delete those items automatically. Be careful of the delete items automatically, because it will delete historical items. It's not when you have created this policy and made it live that it will do future policies, future documents. It will do historical documents as well. You've also got retain items forever, delete items when they reach a certain age, and the bottom one is again another one of those good ones that you can select just to be able to add it to a policy, discover the information that's in your environment. Then you can go back and refine it if required before actually applying any of the retention or deletion settings. So we'll just cancel this and we'll take a quick look at the labeling policy. And let's have a quick look at this one. So again, what you do is you can publish labels, multiple labels with one policy to one location or various locations, as you'll see. So in this case, all we're doing is we're sending it out to SharePoint sites, and we've given it a name, review. This is another one to be aware of, that they won't appear for a day, or it can take up to a day, maybe even longer at the moment with the way that Microsoft 365 is chugging a little bit. So that's that one. And then we've got the retention. Now, if you did notice, there was only about 4 locations we could actually retain information, or gave us the options to retain information. If you want to retain information in Skype and Teams, you're going to need to come here to be able to retain that information. So if we, and this isn't going to be a policy that a user can apply, this is just an all or nothing policy. So if we look at the locations, as you can see now, we can turn these on for Teams. Actually, let me cancel that because that's not one set up for Teams. That's the one that's set up for Teams. There we go, just edit that one. And as you can see, I've just selected Teams channels and Teams chats. It also does Skype for Business as well. Okay, so moving on to the communication compliance, we're able to create policies here to monitor our messaging platforms. So Microsoft have provided us with some out-of-the-box recommended policies. So let's create one of those. Okay, so let's have a quick look and let's customize this policy. So we've got our name, description. We're going to set it for all users, so it's going to be monitoring all users. You can exclude some users, and we've also got reviewers. It's important when you set up the Compliance Center that you add the appropriate permissions, especially if you've got reviewers. They will need to be able to get access to the Compliance Center to review the information if they're a reviewer. Then we've got our locations, so Exchange, Teams, Skype for Business, and Yammer. These are our conditions. We've got communication direction, inbound, outbound, internal. We're looking at trainable classifiers, so we're looking for harassment, profanity, and threats. We're also able to add further conditions. That should be it. We're now going to review and create the policy. So the policy is now created. As you can see, the status is activating. Normally takes up to about an hour for this policy to be fully active. And you can see there's obviously no items or anything else. If the policies are triggered, you will find them under the alerts. And in the reports, this is just an insight into how the policies are doing, escalations, user matches, and so on. And that's about it for the communication policy. There's not a great deal to go into. It's pretty self-explanatory. Inside of risk management is a compliance solution that allows you to detect, investigate, and act on malicious or unintentional activities performed by users within your company. We'll take a look at a policy I created earlier so that I can help. So it'll help me explain how this solution works a little bit better. So as you can see, we've got a choice of policy templates that we can use, data theft, data leak, security policy. If you want to use any of the policies on there, you'll need to have a Microsoft Defender ATP license. Then we can select which users we want to cover. And here we're selecting where we want to manage or what content we want to manage. So in my case, I've selected the SharePoint sites, IT, marketing, company and sales department. We're looking at sensitive information types, finance, and sensitivity labels. I did select highly confidential. So let's reselect that to make sure. Yep. And then we've got these indicators. So this is sharing and downloading or sending sensitive information to Teams, printing or copying to USB. So let's take a couple of instances of what would trigger this particular policy. So you could have a sales manager who maybe has handed in his notice, and he's now starting to download information from the sales department SharePoint site onto a USB stick. This will trigger this policy. Also, if you have a user that wants to work on a document at home over the weekend and she downloads a document that's labeled with highly confidential, this will also then trigger this policy. When the policy is triggered, it starts to create a case. As the case is triggered, it then starts building information regarding that user. As you can see, this has the policy time frame. So not only does it register at the point of which the policy is triggered, it will also look at past activity, in this case for 90 days, and will keep monitoring that user's activity for the next 30 days. When these policies, or when the policy is created, triggered and a case is created, that can then be sent for a reviewer, an internal HR department or an external body. Then the case can be investigated to see exactly what they were trying to achieve, or whether it was malicious or unintentional, and then the appropriate action can be taken. Okay, so let's take a look at data connectors. Data connectors allow us to import and archive third-party data from social media, instant messaging, document collaboration platforms. It'll import the information into mailboxes in Office 365 where we can apply archiving or compliancy policies. As you can see, we're restricted to 26 connectors currently, but they are some of the bigger players. So we've got Android. So this enables you to import messages or phone calls into Office 365 where we can apply archiving or compliancy policies. So as we scroll down the list, we can see that it's got some major players, LinkedIn. We've also got Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, and Zoom. Setting up the connectors is relatively straightforward. I don't have an account that I can connect to currently, but we'll just take a quick look at one of the connectors and how that's done. So if we take LinkedIn for instance, we're terms of service, so we're agreeing that. We're giving it a unique name, and then we're signing into LinkedIn. Once we're signed in, we're able to choose a page, choose a storage, give some admin consent, review, and then we're set up with that connector to import the data. So if your company has a requirement to handle this kind of information, this is the area in which you will come to set up those connectors to be able to import that information into Office 365. Okay, so let's take a look at Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. Before we get into the policies, just to let you know that Microsoft are changing the name to Microsoft Defender for Office 365. The reason they're doing that is they're taking a set of their current solutions, rebranding them and putting them under one umbrella called Microsoft Defender. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have time today to look at those solutions and how that's been packaged up. So today we're just going to look at the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. One of the first things you need to do is to make sure that your alert policies are set up correctly. Microsoft provides you with a set of default policies, but they're all set to email tenant admins. Normally, most users won't have their day-to-day account set up as a tenant admin, so you need to come in here, change the email recipients to make sure you get the alerts that are being generated. Then we're going to skip down to threat protection and we'll take a look at anti-malware. And this is a default policy that's been created. And we'll just take a quick look at the settings. So malware detection response. Do you want to notify recipients if their email messages are quarantined? I've said no. If a message has been flagged as having malware, I don't want my user to go anywhere near it. Then we've got common attachment types. This is your standard blocking email attachments, VBS scripts, .exe. You're able to add your own or remove ones that you deem that you need. Then we've got the 0-hour auto purge. This allows emails to be removed from mailboxes after delivery, and they've been detected to have malware. Definitely worth having on, and it is a recommended setting. Then we've got notifications, who to apply to, and that's about it. You can create other policies and target different user groups with those policies. Okay, so let's take a look at the next policy, which is anti-phishing. So on the anti-phishing, to get to the default policy, you have to click this button. And then you can go in and configure your policy. So you've got your standard, which users are you going to protect, add domains to protect. You obviously want to protect your own. And then we've got the actions. So we've got various actions that we can choose from if an email is sent by an impersonated user or if it's an impersonated domain. We've got mailbox intelligence. That's a good one to have on. It allows Microsoft to learn the user's sending and receiving patterns, so that'll prevent any emails being blocked, being sent to and from those users. Then you've got your trusted senders and your trusted domains. So let's go and have a look at the next policy. So we've got safe attachments. Now in the safe attachments, again, this doesn't come with a default policy. So we'll have a look at the global settings. In the global settings, you're able to turn ATP on for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. You can also turn it on for Office applications. So when the user opens a Word document or an Excel document, and at the top it's saying in safe view, and you can then select or choose whether the user can turn the safe view on or off. And so let's have a look at the anti-spam policy. So give this a second to load. And again, this comes with 4 default policies all turned on, and you're not able to turn these off. So first of all, we'll look at the spoof intelligence. So review senders that are spoofing your domain. Absolutely makes sense to have that turned on. You want a clean reputation through the internet with blacklists and so on to enable you and your company to be able to carry on sending email. Then we've got outbound anti-spam. Again, we want this turned on. We want to be able to prevent spamming from inside of our organization to our customers and so on. And then we've got the connection filter. Now in here, you can edit this policy. You can't turn it off, but you can edit it. You can edit it. You can come in and edit IP addresses or add IP addresses and block IP addresses. And I'm pretty sure it will be the same on this one. So you can come in here, you can do the allowed list, bulk actions. So on spam, move message to junk folder, high confidence of spam, quarantine the messaging, and so on. So it's worth coming in here, checking out all of these settings to make sure they are set up appropriately for your company. And again, just the usual international spam. If you don't expect to receiving email from various parts of the world, just block them. That way you're limiting the attack surface of your company to be receiving emails from illegitimate sources. And on the last policy we want to look at is domain keys. So domain keys, also known as DKIM, is something well worth setting up. This enforces your reputation on the internet, and it will allow recipient mail filters to legitimize where your email is coming from. And that's important to prevent your emails being blocked. Okay, so we've got one more item to cover off, and this is device configuration and device compliance. If you click on either of these links, firstly, you're going to be taken to Intune, and then you're going to be advised Intune has moved, and you now need to go to Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Microsoft Endpoint Manager has been designed to configure devices or any device that has an internet connection. You can also connect your on-premise SCCM system, where you can then migrate workloads over to the new Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Okay, so let's take a look at endpoint security. In endpoint security, we're able to view the devices that have enrolled into Intune, and once the device is enrolled into Intune, we're able to control and push configurations out to those devices. On a security baseline, we can take a look at the policy or profile that I created today. And as you can see, there is a vast amount of settings that we can push to our devices. Now, I've not set or edited any of these settings, but Microsoft have provided us with a default set of settings based on industry standard and by working with bodies such as Cyber Essentials. This is probably one of the first profiles that I'll be looking to push to my endpoint devices. And if we pop back, we can also control Windows Defender. So we can create policies for settings on Windows Defender, same with BitLocker and Windows Firewall. This one here, endpoint detection and response, worth having this set up so you can get devices to send telemetry information back to Endpoint Manager, and then you will set up policies that will trigger alerts, and then you can respond to those alerts accordingly. Next, we have attack surface reduction. So if we have a quick look to see which policies we can create, it's going to be Windows 10, but we're able to set policies or create policies to define device control, attack surface reduction, app and browser isolation, exploit protection, web protection, and application control. So as you can see, there's a lot of policies that we can create to configure and manage our devices. Then we've got account protection. This enables us to turn on or off Windows Hello and use the use of Credential Manager. Credential Guard. Then we've got device compliancy. Within here, we're stipulating a set of requirements for a device to be marked as compliant. Then we have conditional access. Within conditional access, we're able to set a set of conditions before we are going to allow access to our environment. So if we take a quick look, I'm sure most people are familiar with this. We can assign it to users and groups. We can select whether we want app control or user action control. We can set our conditions. So we've got user risk, sign-in risk, device platforms, locations, client apps, and device state. And then we can choose to either grant people access or require them to use MFA. The device needs to be hybrid joined, and so on. So if we then take, hang on a moment, sorry. And then we've got Microsoft Defender ATP. Now, as I spoke about earlier, Microsoft have released a new solution called Microsoft Defender ATP. You're able now to push your devices that are registered in Intune into Microsoft Defender ATP, providing you have the appropriate license. So now let's take a look on the Devices tab. On the Devices tab, we're able to view our enrolled devices by platform, and we can also configure how we want our devices to enroll. We have a section for Windows, Apple, and Android, so you need to make sure that you've configured each of these sections before your devices connect so that they're automatically enrolled into Intune. We've already looked at compliancy policies and conditional access, so let's take a look on the configuration profiles. This has been designed to emulate your on-premise group policies and management systems. So if we take a look at the OneDrive for Business, and we'll edit the configuration settings, and as you can see, it has that familiar structure of your on-premise group policies, so you enable, disable, or not configured. We're also able to push scripts to our devices, and on this tab, we're able to upload our on-premise group policies so that they're analyzed, and there'll be a determination of the level of modern management support. We can also configure when our Windows devices get their updates or major feature releases, and we can also do the same for iOS and iPads. So that wraps things up for the quick demo. Hopefully we've been able to show you some of the key tools that you can use to keep your data secure and compliant. So just to summarize, you're able to use automatic recognition of files and messages containing sensitive data by using rules and artificial intelligence. Set up and implement rules to create alerts to instigate retention and/or future deletion. Automated detection of suspicious activities and policy-based control for users, PCs and mobile devices. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and now we'll answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much for that excellent summary, Mark, of all the tools that we've got available, or a lot of the tools we've got available in Office 365, very comprehensive. So all of the questions that we've had in the Q&A box, we've been able to answer those. So you'll be able to see some of the questions in there. If you've got any more questions, if you can go to the Q&A box now, and we'll be able to answer any over the next couple of minutes before we need to wind up. Mark, I had a quick question for you. So if somebody came to you and they haven't currently been exploiting these security features in Office 365, they've already got Office 365, where would you start with a conversation about how they could start to improve their security situation?
Okay, so we would evaluate the licensing at first so that we can ascertain exactly what they're currently entitled to. Look at their current environment and any requirements around that, and then make recommendations on which security features we would recommend for them to implement. Along with the licensing, you also get benefits of other Office 365 services. So sometimes you need to evaluate the full service or take advantage of the full service to fully feel the benefits of your subscription.
Do you tend to find that people have more available to them than they realise on their existing subscriptions?
Yeah, a lot of our customers do tend to subscribe because they require certain features, but they are sometimes unaware of the full suite of features that they're entitled to with their licensing.
Thank you. Something we should cover briefly is I've shared a link in the Q&A box, an announcement, which is the Microsoft the little grid of the features that you get with the different Microsoft Office 365 SKUs, the products that you can buy. It's quite complicated and a little bit involved, so please have a little review and you can see what you've got and what you might be entitled to. But by all means, come and have an obligation chat with us if you've got some licensing and you want to know what you've got already, or you'd like to find out how much it would cost you to take on some of these extra products, and to see how much that will cost. And of course, anybody who wants help with deployment on that, we can certainly also have a chat with you about that. Okay, just checking the Q&A box. I don't think we've had any more questions, so thank you very much for your attention, everyone, this morning. I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much, Mark, for delivering that presentation and answering all the questions. So anybody who has asked a question in the Q&A box, we've got answers for you there. If you want to follow up and get in touch with Mark, I've put his email address on screen, or if you'd like to have a more general chat with us about those products and services, we'd love to have a talk with you, whether it's licensing or how to exploit the licensing you've already got. So I've put our phone number and email up on that. We've got more events coming up. If you follow us on LinkedIn or other social media, search for Nexus Open Systems and you'll find us. The next webinar is going to be in November, and we're going to cover Anywhere 365, the contact center, an omni-channel contact center, and how that can also link in with Microsoft Teams, so you can get a very integrated, very rounded view of all the contact coming in and out of your organization. So I think that's all that's left for me to do is thank you, Mark, again, and thank you all for attending, and we'd like to see you again in future. Bye now.